Every day on social media, you see wealthy influencers hugging, bottle feeding, and playing with pet lions. It looks like they've finally domesticated them. But archaeologists say this trend is a dangerous illusion, and there is a dark reason your ancestors never did it. You turned deadly ancient canines into fluffy chihuahuas. So why did you never turn lions into house cats? The story starts more than 20,000 years ago, at the edge of a fire, in the depths of the last ice age. Two apex predators are circling the same frozen landscape your ancestors call home. One is a wolf-like canine. The other is the cave lion, Panthera spelaea, a beast up to 25% larger than the lions prowling the African savanna today. Both are large enough to kill a person without much effort. Many researchers believe cave lions, like their modern African cousins, likely hunted in coordinated groups, though this is still debated among paleontologists. Cave art at Chauvet Cave in southern France, painted roughly 32,000 years ago, shows cave lions moving together in clusters, which some scientists point to as early evidence of social behavior. Others argue the animals may have been closer to solitary hunters, more like a modern tiger. What isn't debated is the choice standing in front of your ancestors at that fire. Which of these two animals do you let get closer? At a site called Predmosty in the modern-day Czech Republic, archaeologist Mietja Germont-Pré and her team uncovered something strange in 2009. Buried among mammoth hunter remains dated to roughly 27,000 years ago were the skulls of large canines, skulls that were shorter and wider than any wild wolf on record. Germont-Pré's earlier work at Goyet Cave in Belgium pushed the timeline back even further, identifying a canine skull dated to nearly 36,000 years ago showing that same telltale shortening of the snout. These animals weren't dogs yet. They were the in-between creatures scientists call proto-dogs, and their skulls were changing because someone, generation after generation, kept letting them stay close enough to the fire to breed, eat, and pass that trait on. Thousands of individual people, over thousands of individual nights, made the same small call. Let this one stay. That choice wasn't free, though. Every animal a group of hunter-gatherers tolerated near their fire had to justify the risk, and lions almost never could. In ecology, there's something called the 10% rule. Only about 10% of the energy an animal eats gets converted into its own body mass. The rest is burned just staying alive. To grow 100 pounds of predator, something else has to die to the tune of nearly 1,000 pounds of meat. An adult lion needs somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds of fresh meat a day, every single day, no exceptions. For a hunting band 15,000 years ago already rationing meat between children, elders, and the injured, feeding a lion wasn't generosity. It was a decision that could starve someone else in the group. That math shows up in the archaeological record itself. Cut marks on cave lion remains found at sites in France and Germany reveal that early humans weren't feeding these animals. They were hunting them, butchering them, and eating them alongside mammoths and reindeer. Your ancestors weren't choosing between a lion as a pet or a lion as nothing. They were choosing between a lion as a threat to manage and a lion as a meal. You can see how far the opposite choice eventually went at a burial site near Bonn, Germany, excavated in the 1980s and reanalyzed by researchers including Luke Janssens in 2018. There, archaeologists found the remains of a dog buried alongside two humans roughly 14,200 years ago. The dog had survived a severe case of canine distemper as a puppy, an illness that would have left it unable to hunt, eat solid food, or travel for weeks at a time. In the wild, an animal that sick doesn't survive. This one did, which means someone fed it, kept it warm, and cared for it through an illness with no payoff, for weeks, at the same cost in meat and effort you just heard applied to a lion before eventually burying it like a member of the family. No cave lion burial like that has ever been found, anywhere, from this period. The difference isn't just biology, it's a record of two very different relationships your ancestors were choosing to build, one animal at a time. The proto-dogs at the edge of camp asked for a completely different decision than a lion ever did. Researcher Raymond Coppinger, who spent decades studying dog evolution at Hampshire College, argued that early humans didn't set out to tame anything. They simply stopped throwing rocks at the calmer wolves that came to eat garbage, cracked bones, and scraps that would otherwise rot at the edge of camp. Every time someone chose not to chase one off or tossed it a bone instead of driving it away, they were quietly deciding which genes got to survive near humans and which didn't. One small act of tolerance breeding an animal without anyone ever setting out to breed one. That same daily choice also decided what an animal could become useful for, and this is where the two paths split for good. The wolves your ancestors tolerated were already living in tight hierarchical family groups with an alpha, subordinates, and built-in habits of following a leader. When a hunter-gatherer let one of those animals stay, they were stepping into a role the pack already expected to have filled. And that same instinct to fall in line behind a leader is what eventually let dogs run alongside humans as hunting partners. Tracking and exhausting prey like deer over miles of open tundra matched almost perfectly to the endurance-based hunting your ancestors relied on. A lion pride offered no version of that arrangement. It's a loose, volatile coalition reshuffled through violent takeovers, with no built-in submission instinct waiting to be redirected toward a person, and a hunting style built for a 30-yard ambush sprint rather than a 6-mile pursuit across frozen ground. There was no leadership role for a human to step into, and no shared hunting rhythm to fall into either. Every reason your ancestors had to let a wolf get closer was a reason to keep a lion at a spear's length. History later ran something close to a real-world test of this same question, just with a different cat. Centuries afterward, the Mughal Emperor Akbar reportedly kept thousands of tamed cheetahs across his reign in 16th century India for hunting game. Cheetahs could be tamed within a single lifetime, the same way a lion cub can be bottle-fed today. But historical accounts describe almost none of them breeding successfully in captivity. Every cheetah in Akbar's court had to be recaptured from the wild to replace the ones before it. An empire with enormous resources still couldn't turn taming into domestication. A Paleolithic hunting band, deciding scrap by scrap whether to let a predator closer, never had a real chance at doing it with something as dangerous as a full-grown lion. That gap between taming and domestication hasn't closed since Akbar's time, either. Even today, accredited zoos and sanctuaries with veterinary teams, reinforced enclosures, and annual budgets no ancient camp could imagine still manage adult lions as animals to be contained, not animals to be trusted. Most accredited facilities train keepers never to enter an enclosure with an adult lion unsupervised, regardless of how long they've raised it or how affectionate it seems on camera. If institutions with that much money, training, and infrastructure still won't treat a lion as a member of the household, it says something about what your ancestors were up against with no fencing, no tranquilizer darts, and no room for error. Now for the part your influencer feed conveniently leaves out. In October 2011, in Zanesville, Ohio, dozens of exotic animals were released from a private property in a single night, including 18 lions and tigers. Local police, many without any large carnivore training, were forced to respond immediately to protect nearby residents, and by morning, nearly every escaped animal was gone. Some of those lions had been hand-raised from cubs, bottle-fed, and petted, tame by every definition a viral video would use today. None of that changed what happened once they were loose and disoriented in the dark. It also wasn't an isolated case. One tracking database maintained by a big cat sanctuary organization has logged well over 100 attacks, escapes, or fatal encounters involving privately owned lions and tigers in the United States since 1990 alone. Taming is a costume an animal wears for a lifetime. It isn't a new set of genes underneath. Biologists draw a hard line between the two, and Zanesville shows exactly why it matters. Taming happens within a single animal's lifetime. You raise a lion cub by hand, and it tolerates you, maybe even seems affectionate. But its brain chemistry, jaw strength, and predatory reflexes stay close to fully wild. One loud noise, one sudden movement, and instincts far older than that cub's lifetime can override years of bottle feeding in a fraction of a second. Domestication works on a different clock entirely, rewritten through selective breeding across many generations rather than one. Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev showed how quickly, and how strangely, that process can move. Starting in 1959 at an institute in Novosibirsk, Siberia, Belyaev bred silver foxes for a single trait, and only that trait: calmness around humans. He selected only the calmest pups from every litter and bred them forward. Within about 10 generations, those foxes were developing floppy ears, curled tails, and patchy coats, physical traits nobody had bred for directly, and that don't occur in wild fox populations. Their skulls started to change shape. Their stress hormone levels measurably dropped compared to their wild relatives. Selecting for one behavior appears to have quietly rewritten the rest of the animal's biology along with it. Decades later, descendants of those same foxes still whimper for attention and seek out human contact, despite having no dog ancestry at all, offering a compressed, real-time echo of what evidence suggests happened to wolves near ancient fires over a much longer stretch of time. Dogs are believed to have gone through a similar transformation, just spread across many thousands of years instead of a lab timeline. Their skulls shortened, their teeth shrank, their adrenaline response dulled, and dogs evolved something researchers haven't documented in any other domesticated species studied so far: the ability to read a human face and follow a pointing finger, a skill that even hand-raised wolves largely fail to develop. None of that was inevitable. It came from an enormous number of individual people, at an enormous number of individual fires, repeatedly deciding that this particular animal was worth the risk of staying close. That wealthy influencer on your screen, arm around a lion cub, captions full of heart emojis, is standing in for a decision your ancestors also had the option to make, and mostly didn't. The lion in that photo carries almost none of the genetic rewiring that shaped a dog. It's tolerating a human not built for one. Your ancestors were the ones who got to decide, scrap by scrap and generation by generation, which animal earned that kind of trust and which one never did. One species learned to read your face. The other never stopped calculating whether you were predator, prey, or rival.